The Federation had once been the pride of the galaxy, a beacon of cooperation and strength. But now, as the last remnants of humanity huddled in the shadows of a crumbling Earth, that pride seemed a distant memory. The Helvera, an alien empire born from the darkest corners of the universe, had brought the galaxy to its knees. Their vast fleets, fueled by relentless aggression and brutal efficiency, had crushed every resistance in their path. No one had stood a chance. Until now. Captain Roderick Voss stood in the dimly lit command center beneath the ruins of old Moscow, staring at a holographic map of the galaxy. His once pristine uniform, now worn and frayed, was a reflection of the state of the Federation itself. Tattered, broken, and struggling to hold on to the last threads of its existence. The map was riddled with red markings, planets, and outposts that had already fallen to the Helvera, with no hope of recovery. Only a handful of human colonies remained, and Earth, though scared and battered, had become the final rallying point for the surviving forces. A cold silence permeated the room as Voss reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The Helvera were moving quickly, consolidating their forces, and preparing for the final push to wipe out the Federation once and for all. The last shred of resistance had been crushed on the outer rim, and now the Helvera fleet was advancing towards Earth. It was only a matter of time before the city was reduced to nothing more than rubble. It was a bitter thought for Voss, knowing that his people would never fall without a fight. He wasn't ready to surrender yet. He never would be. "Captain," a voice cut through his thoughts. Commander Talia Drex, his second in command, entered the room, her face grim but determined. She was an experienced officer, tough as steel, and her loyalty to the cause was unwavering. "The Council's ready for you. They've made a decision." Voss straightened, his eyes narrowing. He knew the decision. The Council, the last remaining leaders of the Federation, had discussed it in secret for weeks. It was the last gamble, the final card they had to play. The Iron Crusade. Are they insane? Voss muttered under his breath, his voice tinged with disbelief. The Iron Crusade was a desperate measure, a last-ditch effort to save humanity. It wasn't a plan. It was a prayer. "The decision is final," Talia replied. "They're counting on you, Captain." Voss let out a long breath, running a hand through his unkempt hair. He had seen the horrors the Helvera were capable of. He had fought in countless battles, watched entire fleets obliterated in an instant, but never before had the enemy seemed so unstoppable. But Voss wasn't one to back down from a fight. He had been raised on stories of humanity's defiance, of how his ancestors had fought against impossible odds and emerged victorious. This was his fight, and he wasn't going to let his people go down without giving everything he had. The Iron Crusade was the Federation's last-ditch weapon. The Iron Titans, ancient warships from an era long forgotten, their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. These ships, each the size of a city and armed with weapons capable of leveling entire planets, had once been used to defend the Federation's borders during its greatest days. But the warships had been lost to time, forgotten in the wake of countless conflicts until now. They had been buried beneath Earth's surface, sealed away in hidden underground complexes, waiting for a time like this. "Do we even have a chance?" Voss asked, his voice low, as he turned to face Talia. "We won't know until we try," she replied, her tone firm. "But we're not fighting just for ourselves anymore. We're fighting for everyone." Voss looked at the map again. He could see the Helvera fleet looming at the edge of the solar system, their ships a dark blot against the stars. The Federation's forces were fractured, their morale shattered. But the Iron Titans offered something humanity hadn't had in years: hope. "I'll take it from here," Voss said, his voice hardening with resolve. "Prepare the team. We launch in 1 hour." As Talia nodded and left the room, Voss turned his attention to the mission ahead. The Iron Titans would be their salvation, or their doom. But one thing was certain: humanity would not go down without a fight. The air was thick with tension as the crew gathered in the hangar beneath the warships, each one more massive and awe-inspiring than the last. As Voss climbed aboard his own ship, the Iron Valkyrie, he could feel the weight of history bearing down on him. This was it. The final march had begun. And no matter the cost, humanity would face the Helvera with everything they had. The Iron Titans loomed in the dim light of the launch bay, their massive forms casting long shadows across the cold metal floor. They were relics, machines built for war, forgotten in the depths of Earth's underground bunkers for centuries. Each Titan was a monstrous ship, its hull a combination of ancient alloys and futuristic technology that seemed to hum with a life of its own. Roderick Voss could feel the pulse of the ship as he climbed the ramp to the cockpit of the Iron Valkyrie. He was not just stepping into a machine, he was stepping into humanity's last hope. The crew filed in behind him, each member a seasoned soldier, scared by the brutal wars of the past, their faces grim but resolute. Telia Drex was already at her post, a sharp, calculating presence in the chaos of the hangar. She nodded to Voss as he took his seat at the helm. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fire. She, like everyone else, knew this was no longer just a military operation. It was an all-or-nothing gamble for the survival of humanity. The Iron Titans were supposed to have been decommissioned, their technology too advanced, too dangerous to use in modern warfare. But the Helvera were no ordinary enemy. Their forces were relentless, their weapons capable of tearing entire fleets apart in minutes. Humanity had no other choice. The Titans were humanity's last line of defense, the embodiment of their strength and defiance. And Captain Voss was about to lead them into the fight of their lives. "All systems are green." Talia's voice crackled over the comms. "We're clear for launch, Captain." Voss took a deep breath and activated the controls. The massive engines of the Iron Valkyrie roared to life, shaking the ship as it slowly lifted from the ground. The hangar doors slid open, and the cold vacuum of space greeted them. Outside, the rest of the Iron Crusade's fleet began to form up, each Titan a monolith of power in the starry void. The fleet was small, only a handful of ships, but it was humanity's last hope, and every member of the crew knew it. Voss's eyes locked onto the horizon. The Helvera were out there, waiting. Their fleet was coming closer with every passing minute, the dark shape of their warships a constant presence on the horizon of the Federation's last bastion. The battle for Earth was inevitable, and the Helvera would stop at nothing to finish what they had started. But Voss wasn't afraid. Humanity had been cornered before, and they always fought back. This time, they would show the Helvera that the human spirit was not something to be easily extinguished. Target coordinates locked in. Talia's voice interrupted his thoughts. "We've got one shot at this, Captain." Voss nodded. The Iron Valkyrie was fast, for a ship of its size, but it was still a heavy weapon meant for devastating strikes. Their mission was simple: make a show of force, draw the Helvera into a fight, and hit them where it hurt. The Federation's remaining fleets were scattered and vulnerable, and Earth was on the verge of being overrun. But if they could land a crippling blow, the Helvera would hesitate long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Or at least, that was the plan. Voss's fingers hovered over the weapon systems, his heart pounding in his chest. The Iron Valkyrie was armed with enough firepower to shatter moons, but they couldn't afford to waste a single shot. They had to hit hard, and they had to hit fast. The first volley came unexpectedly. Blasts of energy tore through the void, erupting from the direction of the approaching Helvera fleet. It was a warning shot, a precursor to the devastation that was sure to follow. The Iron Valkyrie responded instantly, its shields flaring to life as the blast splashed harmlessly off the reinforced hull. But the strike had been a message. The Helvera had arrived. "Engage the fleet," Voss commanded, his voice steady, despite the rising tension in the pit of his stomach. "All ships, form up. Let's show them what humanity can do." With a roar of its engines, the Iron Valkyrie surged forward, its weapon systems locking onto the closest Helvera ships. The Titan fired first, unleashing a storm of plasma bolts that tore through the darkness. In the distance, Helvera ships scattered, but not fast enough. The Iron Valkyrie struck like a hammer, its weapons cutting through the enemy fleet with devastating efficiency. But the Helvera were no slouches. Their warships retaliated with brutal force, launching salvo after salvo of energy projectiles that slammed into the Titans with bone-shaking force. Voss gritted his teeth, guiding the Iron Valkyrie through the onslaught. His crew was working in perfect harmony, each soldier knowing their role without a word spoken. But the enemy numbers were overwhelming, and the first wave of the Helvera fleet was only the beginning. Shields holding at 70%, Talia reported, her voice tight with the pressure of the battle. "We need to break through their lines now, or we're done for." Voss's mind raced. There was no room for error now. Humanity had fought, bled, and lost too much to back down now. He had promised the crew, promised Earth, that they would fight until the last breath. They had no other choice. "Push forward. We take the fight to them," Voss ordered. The Iron Crusade surged ahead into the heart of the Helvera fleet, and the battle for Earth began in earnest. The void of space, vast and unfeeling, bore witness to a battle unlike any other. The Iron Titans, massive warships brimming with human ingenuity and unyielding will, carved a path through the stars as they engaged the relentless Helvera fleet. The Iron Valkyrie, flagship of the Crusade, had become a symbol of humanity's defiance, but even with its might, the battle was not without its cost. Roderick Voss gripped the controls of his ship, sweat beading on his brow as the Iron Valkyrie bucked under enemy fire. The shields were holding for now, but their energy reserves were depleting faster than expected. The Helvera were no mere invaders. They were predators, and every move the Iron Crusade made was met with brutal retaliation. He could feel the weight of the decision he had made to push forward despite the risks. Each shot from their enemy had the potential to be their last. But retreat wasn't an option, not when humanity's survival was on the line. "Captain, they're adjusting tactics." Talia's voice crackled through the comms, filled with concern. "The Helvera are coordinating their movements better. They're not just attacking in waves anymore. They're focusing on us. They're trying to divide our forces." Voss scanned the tactical display, his eyes narrowing as he saw the enemy's strategy unfold. The Helvera had always been unpredictable, but now they seemed to be focusing on the Iron Crusade as their primary target. They were relentless, their ships forming tight formations designed to isolate and destroy. It was a typical Helvera tactic, one honed over centuries of warfare. Break the enemy's lines, pick off the weak, and then encircle the rest. "We need to change course," now Voss said, his voice steady, though inside, his mind raced. "Full speed ahead. Don't let them corner us." Without hesitation, the crew of the Iron Valkyrie adjusted their trajectory, the massive ship veering away from the heart of the battle, pulling back with calculated precision. It wasn't a retreat, not yet, not when humanity had so much to lose. But it was a calculated move, designed to gain some distance and regroup. As the fleet pulled back, Voss could see the Helvera ships pursuing them with brutal efficiency, closing in fast. Their dark forms streaked through the blackness, and he knew that if they didn't act quickly, the Helvera would pick them apart one by one. "Status on the fleet, Talia?" Voss asked, his grip tightening on the controls. "3 of our Titans are damaged, Captain. They're holding their own for now, but we can't keep this up forever." Talia paused, her voice strained. "We need to find a way to strike back." Voss's mind worked furiously. The Helvera were closing in on them. It was only a matter of time before they would be trapped, and when that happened, it would be over. But there was still a chance. A slim one. They had to buy time, gather reinforcements. The remaining Federation fleets scattered across the outer rim were their best hope, but that meant they had to stay alive long enough to reach them. "Prepare to enter the asteroid belt," Voss said, making a snap decision. "We'll use the terrain to our advantage. The asteroid belt of the Sol system, a scattered mass of rocky debris, was a hazardous environment, one that could easily turn the tide of a battle for both sides. But Voss knew the Iron Crusade's Titans better than the Helvera knew their own ships. The Titans were built for close-quarters combat, for weaving through obstacles, for using every edge to outmaneuver their enemies. The Helvera, on the other hand, relied on numbers and brute strength. The asteroid belt would slow them down, force them to be more cautious, and buy the Iron Crusade precious time. Engaging now, Talia responded quickly, and the Iron Valkyrie lurched as its engines roared to life. The ship plunged into the dense cluster of asteroids, the crew's breath held in anticipation. It wasn't long before the first of the Helvera ships entered the belt, and the battle began anew. The Titans weaved expertly through the debris, each Titan a war machine guided by human ingenuity and instinct. Energy blasts exploded around them as the Helvera struggled to navigate the dense asteroid field, their larger ships struggling to avoid collisions while trying to fire on the smaller, faster human vessels. Voss's heart raced as he directed the Iron Valkyrie through the chaos, using the asteroids as both shields and weapons, guiding his ship through narrow passages and dodging incoming fire. The massive projectiles from the Helvera ships, unable to adjust quickly enough, crashed into the asteroids, creating blasts of debris that filled the void. But Voss knew the Helvera would adapt. They were relentless in their pursuit, and he needed more than just time. He needed reinforcements. "Any word from the outer rim?" Voss asked, his eyes never leaving the tactical readouts. "Negative, Captain. No signs of reinforcements. The outer fleets are still scattered." Talia's voice grew more tense. "If they don't show soon." "I know," Voss interrupted. His mind raced as the enemy forces pressed in. Every move was crucial. "Hold them off as long as we can. We can't afford to let them catch us. Keep the fleet moving." The battle stretched on, with Voss guiding his ship through asteroid fields, engaging the Helvera at every turn. But the crushing weight of the enemy fleet pressing in around them was undeniable. The Iron Crusade couldn't run forever. Time was running out, and Voss knew the real test was yet to come. In the distance, a shadow broke the void. Something big, something deadly. The Helvera flagship, Dreadlord, had entered the asteroid field. And now, there was no more running. The Dreadlord loomed over the battlefield like a living nightmare, its massive form cutting through the asteroid field with terrifying ease. It was the flagship of the Helvera fleet, a dreadnought so large that it seemed to swallow the stars in its wake. Every inch of its hull was reinforced with the darkest materials known to the Helvera, and its weaponry was designed for one purpose: to obliterate any who dared challenge the Empire's might. Now it was bearing down on the Iron Crusade's fleet with ruthless precision. Roderick Voss's breath caught as he watched the Dreadlord's massive silhouette through the viewport of the Iron Valkyrie. Its weapons bristled with deadly intent, and the rest of the Helvera fleet flanked it like a swarm of vultures circling their prey. The asteroid field, which had been their only advantage, was no longer enough to shield them. The Dreadlord had entered the fray, and its presence was like a hammer, ready to crush the Iron Crusade's fragile hopes. "Captain, they're locking onto us." Talia's voice was steady but laced with urgency. "If we don't do something now, we'll be sitting ducks." Voss clenched his jaw, his fingers dancing over the controls. The Iron Valkyrie had taken more hits than he cared to admit, and the other Titans were in similar straits. The asteroid field was no longer a safe haven. In fact, it had become a trap. The Helvera flagship was capable of precision fire, and it wasn't long before the Dreadlord's weapons began to open fire. "Brace for impact," Voss shouted, just as the first energy blast streaked toward them. The shields flared, taking the brunt of the assault, but the force of the blast shook the ship to its core, sending alarms blaring across the cockpit. The Iron Valkyrie shuddered violently, the hull groaning under the pressure. "Shields at 50%, Talia reported, her voice barely audible above the cacophony of alarms. We won't last long like this. Keep moving, Voss barked, his hands working frantically to evade the next barrage. The Iron Valkyrie veered sharply to the left, narrowly avoiding another deadly salvo, but the sheer force of the impact left the ship rattling in its wake. His crew was working at full capacity, but they were fighting a losing battle against overwhelming odds, and now the most powerful ship the Helvera had ever built. The Dreadlord unleashed another volley, and this time Voss saw it coming. He had no more time to dodge. The Iron Valkyrie was the target, its massive size making it an easy mark for the enemy flagship. "Power down the secondary systems. We're going for broke," Voss said, his voice cold and determined. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. It was time to take the fight directly to the Dreadlord. "Captain." Talia's voice was filled with concern. She knew what Voss was suggesting, the last-ditch maneuver that would sacrifice everything to give them a fighting chance. "We'll make it," Voss said. "We've come too far to turn back now." The secondary weapons on the Iron Valkyrie were designed for long-range support, but they could be overcharged to deliver a powerful, concentrated strike. It was a desperate tactic, one that would leave them vulnerable, but they had no other choice. The Dreadlord had to be stopped, or the Iron Crusade would be crushed in the coming moments. Voss quickly gave the order, and Talia's fingers flew over her console, rerouting the power from the ship's remaining systems into the main weapons array. The hum of the Iron Valkyrie's reactors grew louder as the energy built to dangerous levels. "Charge complete, Captain," Talia said, her voice steady but edged with tension. "We're ready. Fire when you're ready." Voss didn't hesitate. He activated the weapon systems and aimed directly at the heart of the Dreadlord. The massive ship was still firing on the fleet, but the moment Voss saw an opening, he gave the order. Now, the Iron Valkyrie unleashed a single devastating shot, a beam of pure, concentrated energy so powerful that it seemed to tear the fabric of space itself. The beam streaked across the battlefield, cutting through the debris and smoke of the asteroid field like a blade through butter, and struck the Dreadlord head-on. For a brief moment, everything went silent. The Dreadlord staggered, its hull shuddering under the impact, massive arcs of electricity crackling along its surface. It was as if the ship itself had been struck by a thunderbolt. But it wasn't enough. The Dreadlord was a beast, and though it was temporarily disabled, it wasn't destroyed. Its enormous bulk loomed large, and the Helvera crew inside it would be quick to recover from the hit. They would retaliate with everything they had. Voss's heart pounded in his chest. They had landed a blow, but it wasn't enough to cripple the flagship. They needed more. They needed the full force of the Iron Crusade, and they needed it now. "Full retreat," Voss barked. "We've bought ourselves some time. Get us out of here." The Iron Valkyrie turned sharply, the ship's thrusters firing with a sudden, violent burst of energy. But it wasn't fast enough. The Dreadlord was already recovering, and its weapons were charging for the next volley. Voss could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on him. They couldn't keep running, not without reinforcements. But reinforcements were nowhere to be found. It was a moment of desperation, and one final chance for humanity to survive. The Iron Valkyrie surged forward, its engines burning hot as it pulled away from the Dreadlord's line of fire. The rest of the Iron Crusade's fleet followed, desperately trying to outrun the Helvera's unrelenting pursuit. But there was no escaping them now. The enemy flagship, though momentarily staggered by the Valkyrie's devastating shot, was recovering faster than anticipated. Its massive guns were already charging for another barrage, and the surrounding Helvera fleet had closed in, cutting off all avenues of retreat. Voss gritted his teeth, his knuckles white as they gripped the controls. He had done everything he could, but it wasn't enough. The Dreadlord was still in play, and the fleet was scattered. He could feel the weight of every decision bearing down on him. The lives of his crew, his people, his entire species were on the line. He had led them this far, but could he see them through to the end? "Captain, the Dreadlord is locking onto us again." Talia's voice was filled with grim urgency. It's preparing to fire. Voss didn't even hesitate. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. All ships, scatter. We need to break their formation. He flicked a switch on his console, transmitting the order to the other Titans. The Iron Crusade's remaining ships began to veer off in different directions, splitting apart in a desperate attempt to confuse the Helvera gunners. Voss watched through the viewport as the massive Dreadlord fired its first shot, a titanic beam of destructive energy that ripped through the blackness of space like a lance of death. The beam slammed into one of the smaller Titans, its shields flickering and then shattering under the blow. The ship exploded in a burst of fiery brilliance, leaving only a cloud of debris in its wake. Voss's stomach dropped as he watched the destruction. One of their own had just fallen, and there was nothing they could do. The Dreadlord's weapons were too powerful, too precise. The Helvera were ruthless, methodical, and now they were closing in, one shot at a time. Shields are at 30%, Talia reported, her voice tinged with stress. We won't last much longer if we don't break their line. Voss glanced at the tactical display, his mind calculating the odds. The Helvera were relentless. They would keep coming until they had finished what they started. The Iron Crusade's fleet was severely diminished, and every Titan still in the fight was running low on power. They were on the verge of being overwhelmed. But there was still something humanity had in abundance that the Helvera did not: desperation, and the will to fight until the last breath. Get us in range of that asteroid field again, Voss barked. We're going to make one last stand. Talia's fingers flew across her console, redirecting power to the engines and reconfiguring the ship's remaining systems. She was working on pure instinct now, trying to stretch their remaining resources to their limit. The asteroid field was their best shot at survival, but this time they would have to use it not just for cover, but as a weapon. The Helvera ships were too large to maneuver easily in the dense field of rocks, but the Iron Valkyrie and its sisters could turn it into a trap. We're moving, Captain, Talia said. We'll be in position in 3 minutes. The countdown in Voss's mind ticked away. They had 3 minutes to get into position, 3 minutes to set up the trap, and 3 minutes to hold their own against the overwhelming might of the Helvera. But as they closed in on the asteroid belt once more, a new complication arose. A flicker of light appeared in the distance. A ship, a fleet, emerging from the void like a beacon. Voss's heart skipped a beat. It was small, too small to be the reinforcements they had hoped for, but it was better than nothing. His eyes narrowed as he recognized the design. It was a civilian fleet, a group of ships that had been part of the Federation's emergency evacuation efforts. Where the hell have they been? Voss muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. The civilian fleet had been hiding, likely hoping to stay out of the conflict. But now, as they appeared on the edge of the battlefield, they had no choice but to join the fight. It was a risky move, but the Federation could not afford to let anyone sit on the sidelines any longer. Get them in, Voss commanded. We can't fight this alone. Tell them to take the flanks, provide us with whatever support they can. Roger that, Talia acknowledged, sending out the order to the civilian ships. The fleet's communication systems crackled to life as they acknowledged the message and began to move into position. But the Helvera had already noticed the new arrivals. A wave of dread passed over Voss as the enemy flagship adjusted its trajectory, locking onto the new fleet with deadly intent. The Dreadlord had shifted focus, and its weapons were now aimed at the civilians. No, Voss growled. He couldn't let it happen. He wouldn't let it happen. They needed the civilians. They needed everyone. Captain, we have one shot at this, Talia said, urgency in her voice. We take the Dreadlord now, or we lose everything. Voss felt his heart racing. The Dreadlord was locked onto the civilian ships, and if they didn't act quickly, those ships would be destroyed before they could even make a difference. The Iron Valkyrie was still operational, still strong enough to deal a decisive blow. But it would require all of their power, all of their strength, and every ounce of humanity's resilience. "Now, Talia," Voss commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We end this now." And with that, the final charge began. The Iron Valkyrie surged forward once more, engines roaring to life as Voss's grip tightened on the controls. The Dreadlord loomed large ahead, its weapons charging for another deadly volley. Behind it, the Helvera fleet had closed the gap, ready to rip the civilian ships to pieces. But this time, Voss wasn't going to wait for the inevitable. This time, they were going to take the fight to the enemy, or die trying. "Activate all systems," Voss commanded, his voice hard with determination. "We're going in full throttle. No more evading. Get us within range of the Dreadlord. Full power to the forward weapons." Talia's fingers danced across her console, rerouting every last ounce of available energy to the ship's weapon systems. The Iron Valkyrie shook with the strain, but it held together. The crew, their faces lined with exhaustion, but driven by a singular, fierce will, prepared for the final push. "Captain," Talia warned, "the Helvera have concentrated their fire on us. We won't survive another direct hit from that flagship." Voss didn't flinch. He knew the risks. They were already staring death in the face. There was no turning back now. "Just keep us moving," Voss said, his voice steely with resolve. "We'll make it. We have to make it." As the Iron Valkyrie sliced through the void toward the Dreadlord, Voss's mind raced. The Helvera flagship was a formidable fortress, a deadly behemoth that seemed almost invulnerable. Its weapons were powerful, its armor nearly impenetrable. But Voss had one final card to play, a calculated gamble. "Prepare the ship for the overcharge," Voss said, his gaze locked on the tactical display. "We need the maximum burst, all or nothing." Talia looked up sharply, her face pale but determined. "Captain, that's a suicide move. We've never pushed the systems that far before." "I don't care," Voss replied firmly. "We either do this, or everyone dies. Get it done, Talia." The atmosphere in the cockpit was thick with tension as the crew scrambled to make final adjustments, rerouting power, preparing the ship for the ultimate strike. Voss's heart thundered in his chest, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow. He thought of the civilians, of the families, the children who would die if they didn't stop the Helvera now. He thought of his crew, these brave men and women who had followed him through every battle, who had trusted him with their lives. He couldn't let them down. Not now. The Dreadlord fired. The beam of energy shot out from the flagship, streaking through the void with terrifying speed. It slammed into the Iron Valkyrie, shaking the ship to its core. The shields flared bright, flickering, and almost shattering under the force of the impact. The ship rocked violently, sending alarms blaring through the cockpit. The screens flashed warnings, and Voss could feel the tremor in the hull, the deep groan of the ship fighting to stay intact. "Shields at 10%, Talia gasped. "We're on the brink, Captain." Voss gritted his teeth, his hand steady despite the chaos. "Push through. We're almost there." With every ounce of strength left in the Iron Valkyrie, they barreled toward the Dreadlord, its weapons already charging for another deadly shot. Voss's mind raced, calculating every angle, every possible move. He had no choice but to keep going forward. Their only hope was a direct hit, a blow powerful enough to disable the Helvera flagship before they were torn apart. "Full power to the forward cannon," Voss commanded, his voice a razor edge of focus. "We need everything we've got." The Iron Valkyrie seemed to groan as its systems strained to their limits. The charging hum of the weapon systems grew louder, vibrating through the ship. Voss watched the tactical display with laser focus as the range between them and the Dreadlord shrank. Every second felt like an eternity. 3 seconds to firing range, Talia said, her voice strained. "Ready," Voss said, his knuckles white from the tension. "We hit them hard and fast. Now." In an instant, the Iron Valkyrie unleashed its final attack. A pulse of concentrated energy erupted from the ship, a blinding beam of raw power aimed directly at the heart of the Dreadlord. The beam tore through space, cutting through debris and shattered asteroids like they were paper. Voss felt the ship lurch forward with the force of the shot, the ship's hull shuddering violently as the energy blast tore through the void. The Dreadlord had no time to react. The beam struck the Dreadlord head-on. For a split second, there was nothing but silence. Then, the Dreadlord's hull exploded in a burst of light and fire. The sheer force of the impact sent shockwaves through the battlefield, scattering debris across the void. The massive Helvera flagship lurched violently, its weapons systems short-circuiting, its engines sputtering. The Dreadlord, the symbol of Helvera's might, was crippled, its massive frame now a burning hulk in the cold expanse of space. "Direct hit," Talia shouted, her voice tinged with disbelief. "We did it." Voss exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. They had done it. The Dreadlord was down, its power shattered. The remaining Helvera ships were now in disarray, their command structure thrown into chaos as their flagship fell. But Voss knew this battle wasn't over. The Helvera were a tenacious enemy, and though their flagship had been destroyed, their fleet remained. The war wasn't won yet, not by a long shot. "Prepare for the next phase," Voss said, his voice grim, even as a flicker of hope sparked in his chest. "We still have a war to finish." The debris from the Dreadlord's catastrophic explosion drifted in the cold void, fragments of the once mighty flagship slowly tumbling through space. The Helvera fleet had momentarily fallen into disarray, their command structure shattered by the loss of their flagship. It was a rare opportunity, one that Voss knew could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. But even as the Iron Valkyrie's crew let out a collective breath, the reality of the situation set in. This wasn't the end. Not yet. Voss gripped the controls tightly, staring at the tactical display. The Dreadlord's destruction had caused chaos within the Helvera ranks, but the remaining ships were regrouping, swiftly adjusting their tactics. They might have lost their flagship, but they weren't defeated. They were the Empire's core, and they would fight to the last. "Captain," Talia's voice broke through his thoughts. "The remaining Helvera ships are closing in. They're moving into a tight formation. It's a coordinated strike. They're going for the civilians." Voss's jaw clenched. They hadn't just survived this far to let those ships die. The civilians had to be protected, even if it meant risking everything they had left. "Full power to the engines," Voss ordered. "We're not running this time. Take us straight at them." Talia hesitated for a heartbeat. "Captain, if we do that, we'll be vulnerable. We're running on fumes as it is." "Do it," Voss said, his voice unwavering. He couldn't afford hesitation now, not when the lives of so many hung in the balance. The Iron Valkyrie lurched forward, its engines flaring with every ounce of power it could muster. Voss's eyes remained locked on the tactical display, the data scrolling in rapid succession as the remaining Helvera ships moved closer, weapons powering up. The civilian fleet was still a few clicks behind, trying to regroup after their earlier panic. If they didn't act now, the enemy would have them surrounded, and that was a situation Voss would not allow. "Shields at 20%, Talia reported, her voice calm despite the tension. "We're still holding, but barely." "We don't need to hold," Voss replied, his eyes narrowing. "We just need to break their line. We hit them hard and fast, and we break through." The Iron Valkyrie powered on, its weapon systems charging once more. Voss watched as the Helvera fleet reformed, their ships aligning to strike the vulnerable civilians. It was a classic tactic: concentrate firepower and finish off the weak. They underestimated the Iron Crusade, though, and that would be their undoing. "Get ready," Voss growled, gripping the controls tighter. "We go in as hard as we can." The Helvera fleet opened fire first, massive beams of energy lancing out toward the civilian fleet, splintering through the vastness of space. The Iron Valkyrie dodged and weaved through the first salvo, the ship's shields flickering under the strain. Voss's heart pounded in his chest as the enemy ships tightened their formation, but he didn't slow. They couldn't afford to. The Iron Valkyrie shot forward with brutal precision, breaking into the heart of the enemy line. The chaos of space became a blur of movement, Voss's mind racing, calculating their every move. His crew responded like clockwork, every action synchronized in their desperate bid to turn the tide of battle. The Helvera fleet was trying to regroup, but the Iron Valkyrie's speed, agility, and ferocity were proving an equalizer. Their enemy was powerful, but they hadn't expected humanity's grit. "Captain, we're in range," Talia said, targeting their flagship. "The rest of their fleet is distracted." Voss's eyes locked onto the enemy ship, their new flagship, a massive warship that had taken the place of the Dreadlord. It wasn't as formidable, but it still had enough firepower to change the course of the battle. He wasn't going to let that happen. "Fire everything we've got," Voss ordered, his voice cold and determined. The Iron Valkyrie responded instantly, weapons locking onto the enemy flagship. The ship's cannons unleashed their fury, a barrage of concentrated fire that tore through space like a storm. The Helvera flagship took a direct hit to its starboard side, the shields flickering and collapsing under the weight of the attack. But it wasn't enough. The flagship still had teeth, and it wasn't going down easily. Voss watched as its weapons came to life, returning fire with a vengeance. "Shields down to 5%. Talia warned, her voice filled with panic. "We need to get out of here or we'll." But Voss wasn't listening. He couldn't afford to. His eyes were locked on the flagship, the chance to end it all right here, right now. They couldn't retreat, not when they had the enemy on the ropes. "Do it," Voss said, turning to Talia. "One more strike. Full power." She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the controls. Then, without another word, she activated the ship's final weapon systems, pushing the Iron Valkyrie beyond its limits. The ship groaned in protest as it channeled every last reserve of power into a single devastating strike. The energy built up within the ship, a concentrated blast of raw power. Voss's heart raced as he watched the final moments unfold. The Helvera flagship tried to retaliate, but the beam fired too fast, too strong. The Iron Valkyrie's shot slammed into the enemy flagship's reactor core, igniting a massive explosion that tore through the ship's center. The entire vessel erupted in a brilliant burst of light, collapsing in on itself like a dying star. The battlefield went silent. The Iron Valkyrie staggered under the shockwave, but it held together. The remaining Helvera ships were now in disarray, their morale shattered. The tide had turned, but Voss knew this wasn't the end of the war. The Helvera were still out there, but now they had hope, a fighting chance. "Prepare for follow-up orders," Voss said, his voice steady, though his mind still raced. "The war isn't over yet, but today, we've won a battle." The shattered remnants of the Helvera fleet drifted in the cold, empty expanse, the last of their flagship's burning husk slowly falling silent in the void. The Iron Valkyrie remained steady in its place, though its hull groaned under the strain of countless hits. The crew, battered and exhausted, knew their victory wasn't without cost. The battle had been fierce, brutal, and costly, but for the first time in weeks, there was a flicker of hope on the horizon. "Captain, the remaining enemy forces are retreating," Talia reported, her voice tinged with relief but still strained. "Their morale's shattered. They're scattering, breaking formation." Voss allowed himself a moment to breathe. They had done it. Against impossible odds, against the overwhelming power of the Helvera war machine, they had struck a blow that would echo across the galaxy. The Dreadlord had fallen, their flagship annihilated, and the Helvera fleet was in retreat. They had won, but the war was far from over. He leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes for a brief moment, letting the weight of what they had just achieved wash over him. It was a victory, but it was not the end. The Helvera might have lost their flagship, but they were an empire, a force with vast resources. There would be retaliation, and the Iron Crusade had to be ready. "Get me a status report from the civilian fleet," Voss said, his voice steady. "We need to know how they're holding up." Talia patched into the civilian ship's communication network. It took only a few moments before a voice came through, a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. "Captain Voss, this is Commander Ilara of the Federation Evacuation Fleet." The voice crackled through the speakers. We don't have words for what just happened. You and your crew saved us. Our losses were significant, but without you, we would have been destroyed." Voss nodded grimly. "We still have a long way to go, Commander. Your fleet has held its own. But the Helvera won't be finished by this defeat. We have to continue moving forward. Get your ships to the rally point, and we'll regroup." There was a pause before Ilara responded. "Understood, Captain. We'll head for the rally point. We're in your debt." The comlink ended, and Voss turned back to the crew. Their victory had been hard-won, but it had bought them time. A crucial, precious commodity. The Helvera had tasted defeat, and now the tide of the war was shifting. Humanity was no longer just a nuisance to be swatted away. They had proven their resilience, their ability to fight and survive against the galaxy's most powerful forces. "We need to consolidate our fleet," Voss said, standing up and walking toward the viewport. The wreckage of the Dreadlord still smoldered in the distance, a testament to what had been accomplished. "We've won a battle today, but the war is far from over. We can't afford to relax, not even for a moment." Talia nodded, her fingers already moving over the controls. "Captain, the civilian fleet is moving into position. We're coordinating with the rest of the Iron Crusade's remnants. They're eager to regroup." Voss watched as the last remnants of the Helvera ships limped away, fleeing into the blackness of space. They had been defeated, but this victory wasn't just theirs. It was a turning point for the Federation, for humanity. No longer were they the underdogs, scurrying to survive. They had fought back, and now they had the strength to do more. "I want all ships at full readiness," Voss continued. "This battle has proven that we can stand against them, but we need to keep pushing. We have to finish what we started." As the crew prepared for the next phase, Voss couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, mixed with the familiar weight of responsibility. He had led them to this moment, and now he had to guide them through the next. The Helvera were wounded, but they were still a threat. Humanity had to continue fighting, continue pushing forward, and never forget what they had proven today. "Captain," Talia said, her voice softer now, "what do we do next?" Voss turned back to her, his gaze unwavering. "We keep fighting. We show the galaxy that humanity will never bow, never surrender. The Iron Crusade is just getting started." As the Iron Valkyrie began to move toward the rally point, the stars around them seemed to burn a little brighter. There was a new determination in the crew's eyes, a new fire in their hearts. They had been tested, and they had survived. Now they would make their enemies remember why humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The war wasn't over, but humanity had just proven it was far from finished. And as the Iron Valkyrie turned toward the horizon, Voss knew one thing for sure: humanity would not be forgotten. They would carve their place in the stars, and nothing, no force, no empire, would stand in their way.